Hello everyone and welcome to another Atomic Mass Transmissions Live. My name is Will Schick, Director of Product Development for Atomic Mass Games. Today we're going to be painting the one and only M'Baku, leader of the Jabari tribe of Wakanda. I'm very excited to put some paint on this fella, talk a little bit about his design, and just hang out and chill for an hour while we get things done. So with that, let's go ahead and turn that on. Let's just dive right in. All right, got my brushes, got everything to go. Probably don't need those anymore. Okay, so I think first we'll just tackle the skin. So we're gonna mix up a flesh tone on our own using some of our Chimera colors. So I'm just gonna play around on the palette a little bit, try to figure out what makes me happy. A little bit of violet, more of our red oxide, maybe a little too much black. It's okay. So I want my tone to have a decent amount of warmth to it, a little red, because that's gonna have a nice little pop and make everything easy. One of the ways to approach like non-Caucasian skin tones or darker skin tones is to start from a purple foundation and then you can build from there. I've seen some folks do some pretty cool stuff where you just paint all of the flesh purple and then you can build up like your reddish brown skin tones from that. I'm not going to be doing that today. I'm just going to kind of play around with my colors until I find something I think looks kind of nice. That's pretty good to start. We'll start there. Start with a little bit of water just to kind of like loosen it up. And the great thing about flesh tones is that everybody has a different kind of skin tone. So you have a lot of flexibility and freedom to make a gigantic sloppy mistake right off the bat. Broke the seal early on that one, perfect. Now I don't have to worry about pretending to be professional at this at all. We just start off. We just start things going with a big old mistake. Yeah. All right, so we're gonna knock in this color. This is gonna be kind of my foundation, and then from there I'll play around with it. I can always darken the colors by using shades and washes, a little bit more purple, or adding a bit more black, being careful not to desaturate it because I really want the skin tone to be nice and vibrant. You know, we all have the same blood running in our veins, and skin is ultimately translucent. So you want to think about that for your undertone, is that you're always going to have kind of that ruddy undertone from the blood. And then of course that's going to get colorized by all the transparent skin layers on top of it, and then skin's going to have different kind of pigments to it. But end of the day, if you strip all that away, we're all the same fleshy stew on the inside. And so that's why you're always going to want to keep that idea of like red, warm colors and tones. Once you move too far away from that warmth, you know, too much blue or too much green, too much cool color, that's when you start getting into your undead looks. As far as assembly goes, Dallas Kemp just did a really fantastic video when he assembled Claw for Crisis Protocol. However, all the techniques he showed in that video are pretty much applicable to any hard plastic miniature assembly. So go check that out. He did that last week. It was a great watch. No, 2 weeks ago, because they played a game last week. It was a fantastic watch. It's on the YouTube channel now, so you can go check that out. Of course, there are plenty of other assembly tutorials and stuff from some fantastic folks and hobbyists on the internets. I just happen to think Dallas is a bit of the cat's pajamas, which is a weird saying because if you've ever tried to put a cat in pajamas, not great. Like earlier today, somebody was talking about the laundry list of issues they had to take care of in the office, and I was like, that's a weird thing to say because never in my entire life have I made a list for my laundry. It should be the laundry basket. Just add it to the laundry basket of issues. That'd be more accurate. Ann? Are you with me?
I'm with you.
I don't feel like you are. I feel like you're placating me, and I don't like it.
I'm sorry.
I don't need no damn yes man.
I'm just talking to chat.
That's cool. Ignore me. I get how it is. That's fine. That's fine.
You have my full attention.
Nope. It's over.
No.
It's, the moment passed. I'm out. I'm just going to continue to, dance like a monkey. You're just a little organ grinder just playing the tune. I'm just showboating around on the streets of Venice. I don't know. Probably? That's probably. Renaissance times? That was probably the height of the organ grinder monkey show biz phenomenon, right? 1600s, Venice, Italy. Everyone's just like, look at that creature go. He's like people, but not. There were no exotic animal permits, no concern about, proper dietary restrictions or anything. Okie dokie. We got that layer down. That's looking pretty good. I'm just kind of going back through and making sure that everything is got solid coverage. Although the Zenith Prime does kind of help me out on that because those natural shadows and highlights we can play around with. So any mistakes at this point can kind of be considered happy little accidents. And of course I didn't do the hands, so we're going to cross our fingers that I have just enough color left without having to go and remix. One of the biggest kind of, I think, aid to assembly, if you're a first timer or an old timer or a mid timer, it doesn't really matter. But with hard plastic miniatures, you can never go wrong with thin plastic cement. So you want to you can use super glue. Super glue will glue anything together eventually, but get the glue that is formulated for this specific material. And the reason that you want to do that is because it actually denatures the plastic and then it fuses it together, which means that your bonds are going to be super, super strong. It's very easy to work with, pretty hard to mess up. And as an added benefit, if you do break something, making the repair can be very, very simple. So, snapping, say, a little knobkerrie, best word ever. You can, take the plastic glue and fuse the parts back together. It might be a little shorter when you clean it up, but it will fuse the parts back together and give you a pretty robust and strong hold. So any of that stuff can be really, really useful. And I do recommend it. I think it's definitely a fantastic tool, and I don't know that everyone uses it. The other thing that I will throw out there is if your glue doesn't seem to be sticking the parts together properly, your glue is probably old and you probably need new glue. Not a lot of folks, I think, consider that because it's not something that we're really trained to think about, but glue doesn't last forever. Super glue, plastic glue, all that stuff, it has a shelf life. And because you just can never be really sure how long something sat in a back room or how long it sat on the shelf, you don't know. So more than likely, unless you're doing a lot of gluing or you get really lucky, your glue's probably going to go bad before you use it all. And that's unfortunately just a fact of life. It's a fact of the hobby. So if you are really struggling on an assembly and you, for some reason, like, you're like, this glue used to stick things together really well, but now it just seems to be a struggle. It doesn't want to seem to bond. It's not the plastic, it's the glue. The glue is bad, get new glue. And then toss that old bottle because it's probably past its usability date. The number of times that I've been frustrated and like saying things I'm not allowed to say on this stream because it's a family show, when I was assembling things and they just weren't going together, when I take a moment and I pull myself out of it and I go, okay, is it me? Is it the miniature? Is it the glue? It's almost always the glue, especially if I've been using the glue successfully for quite a while. You shouldn't have issues, but you will, obviously, if the glue is past its date. So always keep that in mind, and just be aware it's just going to be a thing. I know we all want to use up all of our materials completely before we have to go buy new materials, but it just doesn't work that way. The milk spoils, the glue spoils. Okay, so we've got that down. We've got the inner cloak down. Just because we're like rocking and rolling here, I'm going to kind of pick out the areas where I think I want some wood. That was like way too much magenta, so that's cool. Just kind of playing with my brown colors here. Actually, might not be a bad. We might shift gears here. I don't mind this as kind of a highlight to our flesh tone. That's got a nice warmth to it. So let's play really quick. See on that. Seems pretty good. Grab this. A little bit of water. Thin it out. And away we go. Let's see here. So I got my highlight color here that I originally was going to use maybe for the wood parts, but I realized that I was mixing a pretty great skin highlight. I had the warmth and kind of the saturation I wanted for everything. I've thinned it down pretty loose. That's not the word I want. Words! I've thinned it down quite a bit. It's more like a glaze consistency right now, and the reason that I did that is because it's going to allow me to really build those colors up over time. So even as I apply it, if I don't notice a ton of change right away, or on the alternative, if I'm like, holy cow, that's really bullying the colors underneath and I don't like it as much, as it dries, it's going to kind of it's going to tame itself down a little bit. And it also gives me a lot of control to be able to build colors up. And obviously we talked about how skin is just a translucent organ that is colored by what's underneath it, which is all of our meat stew, and then it's also colored by the pigments and stuff in it. What? We're just giant walking sacks of meat stew, and you know it.
I don't have to like it.
People are soup sacks. That's just how it is. Your insides are soup. They're suspended in a liquid. Literal definition. So playing with transparencies when you're trying to do skin tones, especially if you're trying to do slightly more realistic or even just, stylized skin tones, those transparencies are really going to help lead to that, because you're going to get that nice natural looking layer to everything. And as an added bonus, it's much harder to, muss up your work because you get to go a lot slower. So it takes a little bit more time, but the results are definitely worth it. Ooh, Yeah, people are soup sacks. That's what I'm saying. Ah, yeah, M'Baku, he was a blast. I know they used him in the stream game that Josh and Dallas played last week. So the cards, I think all the cards have been shown now for Claw and M'Baku. But one of the things that was really fun about M'Baku specifically was the fact that we got to partner with Marvel to kind of do our own universe take on M'Baku. So, the Crisis Protocol M'Baku draws inspiration from some of the other media and spots in Marvel, but is also kind of a unique and one-of-a-kind spin as well from the Crisis Protocol side. So, and it's always very exciting when we get to work with Marvel on that stuff. Black Widow Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. was the very first one we did. We've talked about her before, but that was one of the initial launch ones. We got to do something similar with Mordo, an Ancient One, and just take inspiration from some modern stuff and do something that we felt really fit well into the universe that we want to create, the Marvel kind of experience that we hope to present, and that kind of fits the vision and artistic style of the game. Because I think, a lot of the times, one of the things that's so neat about Marvel Comics is that we get to kind of watch characters grow and evolve, and different creative teams put their unique stamp and their own design choices and aesthetic looks on things. We see things adjust based on media and different representations in various outlets, whether that's the movie does a thing, or the comic books do a thing, and then the cartoons do a thing. Maybe there's a one-off or a six-shot miniseries or things like that. All those things can have reverberations throughout. Be very careful with this white because it's going to be pretty powerful, but I need to go a little lighter. But we kind of get to see these characters in different form and different kind of ways. And so it was really nice to be able to take that approach with M'Baku here and create something that we were very excited about having to add to the Wakanda affiliation and add to kind of the overall Crisis Protocol universe. And we do similar things with affiliations and such, right? I mean, we love drawing as many direct parallels and inspiration from kind of Marvel 616, the gold standard of these characters and their stories and what everyone knows. It's not always realistic that we can hit that nail on the head every time exactly as it was, so we will take some liberties at the fact that we are not the actual 616 universe, but our own little spin-off of that universe, and use it to our advantage for either game specifics, game balance purposes, or maybe it's just release schedule cadence and stuff. The game launched obviously in a very similar way, with the Avengers being the poster child of the quote-unquote good guy affiliation, and we needed something to pair them against, and we wanted something that kind of bucketed a lot of the big name villains together in a way. And the Cabal is something that has existed in the Marvel universe before and as a recognizable kind of group, but it's shifted, its membership has shifted and been different in different media and different formats. So we kind of took that idea and used something that was familiar, but also put a spin on it that made it very instantly Crisis Protocol itself, and we've been able to play with that as well. So I imagine we'll be hearing some stuff about Mini Stravaganza soon. I know, without spoiling too much, we've definitely talked about plans for this year and where we're going with that. So, I would guess, you should hear some stuff in the next couple months for sure. As things get solidified and locked in. But we always have a lot of fun at Mini Stravs. It's a great spot to hang out, spend a few days hobbying, painting, playing, showing off some exciting new stuff for the future. It's a great way to kind of get through the pandemic age where we couldn't reliably expect to get together in the same spot like an Adepticon or something like that. Now we've, moved on a little bit, and we got to have our early year keynote, which might have normally been held for a Mini Stravaganza at that time at Adepticon. It was a lot of fun, worked out really great. So that will probably continue to be a moment there. But we still want to be able to spend a few days hanging out, doing some all-intensive programming. Ooh. That side of the face would be a little bit more in shadow, so we don't want to do too much highlighting there because we just like to feel like it's a little bit more in shade since his mighty M'Baku white gorilla cloak kind of steps in. Smooth gradients and flesh tones on miniature. My kind of go-to is usually to make sure that my paints are nice and thinned down to almost a glaze consistency, and then I will use the two-brush blending technique that I'm using right now, where I have my blending brush that I keep in my mouth, which probably makes me sound real good on mic. And what you do is you place your paint down, pull your blending brush, and then just kind of like let the blending brush, blend, shockingly enough, like the name implies, the different color gradations together. But I'll be honest, I've always struggled a lot with, getting smooth gradients that I'm really happy with on flesh. And sometimes I nail it, and sometimes I spend way too much time on it. But an invaluable piece of advice, and something that I do go back to when I can, is to always have reference up of the skin tone or example skin tones that I'm trying to hit, especially like portraits that have all the beautiful details of the face, and they have the kind of lighting that you want because they're usually lit in the same way as we paint our miniatures. And that guide can be a really helpful tool to make sure that you're looking at your colors properly and you're pulling everything together the way that you want. Always have reference if it makes sense to have, or if it's available to you. And that reference can be, it can be a panel from a comic if that's what you're trying to replicate, or if you're going for a natural skin tone, just grab somebody whose skin you like and you're like, this is the skin tone. And then just play with it, work at it. But thin paints, always thin paints. Use glazes, use the blending brush, go slow. It's not gonna be fast. Especially if you want smooth. Classic adage my dad used to drill into us all the time was the same one that I know got slammed into his head during his time in the service and everything. The lifelong military guy, but it's slow is smooth, smooth is fast. It's no different when you're painting. Because if you're slow, you're smooth, and if you're smooth, you're going to get great results, which means that you're going to spend less time going back and fixing mistakes, or less time having to redo things because you don't like how they turned out. So that's what you want to do. All right, I'm pretty happy with that. I think maybe we could go one more level, maybe. But then again, I'm a little hesitant to do that because I'm pretty happy with where we are, and if we keep going, we might never get off this part. But yes, go slow. Take your time. Painting is not a thing that you have to do, it's a thing you get to do. Part of the joy of the hobby. Yeah, playing games and engaging with everybody on the tabletop and the battlefield, and it's definitely fun, and it's a huge part of why we all do what we do. But the hobby portion, the artistic part, the painting, the skill development there is just as big of a part. And honestly, it's probably the part you'll spend your time doing the most. Because getting people together for a game, it's phenomenal if you've got a group that meets once a week, maybe twice a week. You're in that stage of life where that just works for you. Maybe your partner, or even if another, your kids. Maybe you have somebody at your house, your roommate. You all play the same game. So you have folks who play in the same spot, so you can get in maybe some more games and stuff. It's pretty rare though. The vast majority, I think, of people, it's the hobby, it's the painting, the creation part, the preparation for the game that's going to be the spot where you get to spend the most time. So make it enjoyable, make the most of it. I always tell folks, I'm like, it's wonderful if you love these games and the play experience and all of that, but you have to at least like or be interested in the hobby portion. Otherwise, you're just missing a huge part of what these games bring to the table. What you get to do with them over the course of all the years that you engage with them. I always say it's a feature, not a bug. The fact that they're too light, but I'll fix that later. But the idea that these come unassembled and you get to build them, the fact that they come unpainted and you get to put your personal creative stamp on them, you get to paint them as your own works of art. It's all features. It's not a bug. It's not a bug. And more than half of our staff at the studio is entirely focused on the hobby portion of it, the assembly, the painting, the miniature creation. Like, we have an entire team of engineers who make sure that assembly and details and all of that are great. We have an entire cadre of incredibly skilled sculptors who work with the studio to create these little miniature works of art. We have folks who obsess over how do they paint, how do they assemble, how do they look, what can we do better, what can we improve on, how do we take it to the next level. So don't overlook that part, you know? We don't. We're doing everything we can to make sure that these experiences are wonderful and inspiring and that you'll see success. And to improve those skills, and then when you get to the game table and get to explore that stuff, you get to do so with your awesomely painted miniatures, and it's like a whole ecosystem. Okay. Hoopa. Let's go ahead and move on to our gorilla fur. So the first thing I want to do is I need to apply a bit of a wash because I want to emphasize some of the fur. We can see it in the zenith, which is great, but ooh, that's a lot of blue. I kind of want to make a little bit of a gray. So I'm just going to mix some, apparently violet. Is that violet? I thought I put black on my palette. Did I put black on my palette? My goodness. No wonder it kept coming out purple. I was like, why is this coming out purple? Because it's not black, Anne.
I'm so sorry.
I don't.
Your eyes have failed you.
I know. It looks the same. Don't tell me you can tell the difference. Don't lie. Don't lie to these people.
It's hard to see sometimes, especially in the bottle.
It's a very rich purple. I don't have the bottle. I put out violet on purpose, but that was not the color that I wanted right there. But I guess I forgot to put out black, so here we are. A little bit of this blue. So I want to make like a blue-gray for my gorilla fur. And I grabbed the purple again! Oh my god, I'm the worst! It's alright, I'll take it. I think that actually worked out pretty well. I like this. All right, let's get in there with a little bit more white. Don't sigh at me.
That was just me forgetting to breathe. It wasn't personal.
All right, it felt very personal. It felt like an attack.
Hey, why don't you tell these people a little bit about what you think about sub-assembly painting versus waiting till you...
Man, you want to get controversial, do you?
I mean, the people are asking them.
Just because somebody asked the question doesn't mean that it won't start something. So for the vast majority of my painting, like 99%, and Dallas will basically tell you the same thing, I don't do sub-assembly painting because I don't think it's worth it. if the brush can't reach it, typically it means the eye can't see it, and therefore no one else is going to notice it either. So why spend time painting something all beautiful up that is going to get covered by another part anyway, right? There are exceptions to that. You know, if you've got arms that go across the body in a way that makes it really difficult to get to areas that you can see, and you can kind of figure this out when you look at the miniature, you know, in photos. Why did I say it that way? I don't know. In photos, turn into a Schitt's Creek character here. The baby. But in photos, you can kind of tell right away, like, oh, this area, I can see a lot of it, but it definitely looks like this part might be difficult to get to because of this other part that's in front of it. And that kind of depends on your brush control. But the vast majority of the time, I find it not to be worth it because you just wind up painting stuff that you'll never see anyway. And then, you know, sure, it makes it easier to paint, but then you have to assemble it, and that means that you're going to have to clean off some glue probably or some paint so that you can get the glue to it. And you have to worry about being very careful with your glue. Now we're talking about potentially if you have paint over an area, you're not going to be able to use plastic glue anymore because the plastic glue will only bond the bare plastic. So you either have to shave down the area to make sure that the plastic is exposed, or you're now back to using super glue, which will bond the surfaces, but not great. And if you don't actually take care of the paint anyway, you're bonding paint to paint potentially, and that's a weaker bond point because the acrylic paint can wear or tear off. Now, if you're, and you know, again, when I talk about that stuff, it's everything that I paint winds up getting used in games. I'm not painting for competition. I do have my stuff spend most of the time on its shelf looking cool, which is why I love, you know, taking my time and doing the best of my abilities when I paint, because I know I'm going to look at it a lot on my miniature shelf in between battles. But I want my miniatures to be fairly durable. I need them to be robust. I'm going to handle them. They're going to get played with. I'm going to loan them out to, you know, get used on streams, and I'm going to have my kids or my partner play with them when we play games. So I want to make sure that, you know, I'm getting that really solid bond that I can get from utilizing plastic cements in the way that it's meant to be utilized and getting those welds. So usually when I paint things in sub-assembly, this is the times I feel like it's necessary. The places where I assemble it afterwards are always weaker than anything else that I do. Something to keep in mind as well. And then the last bit for me that I don't particularly love about sub-assembly is that if you're trying to keep a consistent light source and you want your highlights and your shadows to kind of make sense, you run into this problem where if the miniature isn't assembled, then you don't necessarily know where everything's supposed to go. And that can be problematic because now you're highlighting things independent of how they fit on the composition. So if you're not willing or not interested in going back and checking the parts and kind of like reassembling them, pseudo-assembling them to be like, okay, this arm is pointed down, so I need to make sure that the underside of the arm is dark, and it's just another level of spatial geometry that I don't want to deal with when I'm painting. Like, I just want to go. I like to fall into a flow and just keep going. To me, it's very zen-like, and I don't want to stop and have to think about things a lot. I barely want to think during my normal times, so my relaxation times, less thinking is better. Like, I just like getting into the zone, as it were, and going crazy with it. So these are kind of all the reasons as to why, for me, you know, I typically avoid doing sub-assembly painting. I have done it And there are times where I will mention it on stream for certain characters where I'm like, this is just better to do in sub-assemblies. But it's rare. And for the most part, I think, there are very few miniatures where it makes a lot of sense to do, unless, and this is the big moment, you're painting for a different reason. If your goal is to create something that's going to go into the worthy painting competition, or you want to be a display quality piece, right? You're painting to that studio level. There's a conversation to be had, because at that point, things like how the underside of the cloak is painted will matter. They could have a huge impact. So you have to be able to access it and be able to get to those spots, because the miniature will be judged from a lot more angles than just like your standard gaming miniature, right? These are all things that you, as the painter, as the artist, have to be figuring out for yourself. See that I made a big mess over here, but that's okay because I think I still have some of my paint. So I can just go back in, clean this area up, maybe, or I can mix more of my color, which I might have to do depending on how much of my stuff I have left. We'll just pull a little bit more of this back in. So I think a lot like painting techniques or color choice or anything else, it's all going to come down to the person who's doing it and how they feel about the miniature and what they're trying to accomplish and what works best for you. I told you what works best for me. You might agree with that or disagree with that. You might agree with it halfway, all the way. I don't know. That's the best part about learning how to paint and doing this stuff, is that you get to absorb and learn all these different techniques and these different ways of doing things from various people, as many people as you want, who are willing to share with you how they do things. And one of the things I love about this hobby community is that you really have never met anyone who's been a Colonel Sanders and refused to tell me their 11 secret herbs and spices for how they painted something. They'll all tell you, because at the end of the day, the ingredients aren't the important part. It's the practice and dedication to the skill that's the important part. If you're willing to put in the effort and learn it, that's what matters. That's what'll make the difference to everything. And ultimately, even if you put in the skill, or even if you put in the time to learn it super well, you'll still put your own spin on it. And in that way, it's very much like every other creative art. You can copy, but you'll never be a copycat, because it will always be different. It's just how it works. Same reason why when your favorite restaurant doesn't taste right, you know immediately that there's a different chef in the kitchen. He's using the same recipes, he ain't making the same meal. Because whoever it is back there is putting their own unique spin, their own unique touch, their own unique puttanesca, and I know. Because it sounds fancy even though it's just like a sauce. on what they're doing. And you'll do the same thing with painting. And that's part of the joy and the fun of it. Is that you get to really discover your own style and vibe. This is the other great part about hard plastic is that it's flexible. So I can just hit that knob curry as much as I want and not really have to worry about it. Yeah, I mean, look, we always talk about the 36-inch test. If your miniature looks great from arm's distance, which is about 36 inches, because that's where you'll view it, then it's a phenomenal miniature. The vast majority of what I paint, and I imagine what a lot of folks out there are painting, who are hanging out in the chat, it's going to wind up on the table, it's going to wind up on the shelf. So no one's going to come in and stare longingly into your miniature's eyes, you know? It's just not how it works. They're going to look at it, they're going to spend, you know, when somebody comes up and looks at your miniatures, they're going to look at the face, because we all as humans are, you know, designed to look at faces. So if you can master the upper torso, you know, chest to top of head, if you get really good at painting those areas, you almost don't need to paint anything else, because no one's going to look any further than that. They're just going to be like, yep, that's a great looking miniature. Look at it. The face is so lifelike. This is so great. And of course, the unfortunate part about that is, you know, painting faces is maybe one of the harder things to get right, because we as humans are very picky about our faces, because that's what we're wired to look at first. It's how we identify friends and threats and everything else. It's all by face. So if there's a spot where you should spend more of your time practicing, it's going to be the face. There's a place where you can spend a lot of your time working on from a painting standpoint. Spend a lot of your time on the, you know, from here up, because that's where everyone's going to put their attention, and almost no one will look at their shoes. That's why all of my shoes are done in as minimal colors as possible. Just like, yep, a little bit of black or a little bit of brown, a cup, like a wash, a single highlight, shoes done. Sometimes I don't even highlight them, because I know no one's going to spend any time looking at their feet, unless there's a specific compositional element that says you should look at this guy's feet. If, for example, somebody's doing a big old flying kick and their foot is directly at the front of the romance angle, you should probably spend a little time on that person's foot, because people are going to see it.
What's a romance angle?
What's a romance angle? Well, when a mommy angle and a daddy angle really love each other. So the romance angle is something that we discuss a lot when it comes to sculpting and posing for miniatures. And the romance angle is effectively the angle where the miniature looks the best. It's the spot where you're going to take all your pictures from, like your box cover photo, your fancy product photography shot. Obviously, a miniature is three-dimensional, so there's a lot of different angles that will matter for it. But, you know, as the sneaky studio, one of the things that we have to realize is that, you know, these miniatures are going to be put on packaging, so there's going to be like one angle that everyone's going to see, and that's going to be the angle that defines the miniature. So for instance, your romance angle on M'Baku is somewhere in this little vicinity, right? And so what you're going to do is you're going to say, all right, where does he look best? Where do I like it the most? And so we'll do photo shots, and what our photographer Matt Furbachet will do is he'll send a whole bunch of still images basically at every angle from the 180. And then we'll argue and argue and argue about which one's the romance angle. And this is something we think about when we're sculpting as well. We don't determine the specific romance angle because it can change based on the paint job and stuff. For example, I think that one that's on the screen right now is the romance angle for M'Baku, and you'll notice that that is where all of his product photography is basically centered on. Because you can see his face, you can see his weapon. Oh, maybe I moved it. Let's see. This camera is so confusing to me. Maybe it's right there. But you can see his face, you can see all the detailing on his torso, you can see his cool white gorilla mask on his shoulder. And it's just got this powerful pose and everything's going on to it. So that's the romance angle. And as we look at sculpts and as we work through the process of engineering and all that, we do pay attention to does it have a strong romance angle? Are we blocking things? You don't want things that block the face. So for example, his cloak is probably unnaturally depressed down to keep his face clear, right? If you kind of look at how this shoulder is compared to this shoulder, in reality, he'd probably have fur all around his face. But with the sculpt, we make sure that the face is completely clear and that we can see that because it's an important focal point for the character, like we just discussed. You watch where the weapon comes, you're looking for weird tangents and things like that. So, the knob Korea is really important. The pose and the stance. This is part of the reason why putting characters on tactical rocks, quote unquote, is so important because it gives you a different angle at which to center the miniature, and it allows for more posing. Humans can only do 7 poses. It's just how your anatomy works. So you need different elements, you need different ways to manipulate those poses and to manipulate what a human body can do anatomically to make things varied and interesting. Having, legs not be parallel to each other, but have them be akimbo, having different changes in elevations. All of that comes back to make a really strong miniature because we only ever see these characters in one specific shot. And so making sure that shot is really good is very important. And that is the whole thing on romance angles. And with that, we are out of time, so we'll stop here with our M'Baku. We did a great job on the skin. We kind of got the gorilla cloak started, but overall, for a tabletop mini, I'd probably just leave it like this with the single coat of dry brushing, but more than likely I'll go back and mess around with it a little bit more. And then we got to get to all the other elements. So with that, thank you so much for joining me. Tune in tomorrow. Dallas Kemp is going to be saying General Kenobi to y'all as he is going to be painting up General Grievous from Star Wars Shatterpoint, so you should check that out. It's going to be a fantastic one. I don't know what he's doing with it, but I think he's going to get a little crazy and wild with it, so we'll see what he does. That'll be at 1 p.m. Pacific. Otherwise, you can come on back next Tuesday, 1 p.m. Pacific. We're going to have some more painting, hobby, and stuff going on for the rest of the month, just hanging out, doing some cool stuff. Always love the questions and the engagement. And you can check out all of our social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter for all the latest and greatest information, including updates, cool photography, notifications of streams, other things. I don't know, Ann, what else do you put up there? No philosophical musings on life, that's for sure.
No, we're doing lots of hobby challenges with the staff.
Oh, staff hobby challenges as well. And of course, any article series, panels to plays, all of those good things to find out what's coming next for the games that you love the most. Till next time, I've been Will. You've been great. Be good to each other, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye.